Happy Friday. Welcome to class. I hope you guys have had a great week so far. Hopefully you are staying warm. I know it is getting um, rainy and snowy out there, so stay warm. All right. So in class on Wednesday, we kind of left off with the United States entering World War I and Russia exiting World War I, and this is due to the Russian Revolution, right? So in 1917, they are facing um, upheaval within their own country, and they're no longer able to fight against Germany and Austria Hungary and some of those other countries because they've got their own issues going on within their own borders. You read about that and had a checkpoint yesterday that was due, but I'm going to show you a little bit of a video as well because within this whole debate comes some very interesting things from history, specifically the story of the Romanovs.
It was one of the 20th century's most intriguing mysteries. What really happened to the Romanovs? The last in a dynasty that ruled Russia for 304 years, Tsar Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, and their 5 children were taken prisoner during the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. In the early morning hours of July 17, 1918, their captors reportedly executed the entire family near Yekaterinburg in central Russia. But no bodies were ever found, leading people to wonder if they might still be alive. Almost immediately, various people started stepping forward, claiming to be surviving members of the royal family. None were more famous or more convincing than Anna Anderson. After jumping off a Berlin bridge in 1920, the young woman was sent to a mental hospital, where she soon claimed to be the youngest Romanov daughter, Grand Duchess Anastasia. Believers in her cause argued that she was even recognized by Romanov family members, other European royals, and former courtiers. After more than a 30-year legal battle, a German court rejected Anderson's claim to the Romanov fortune in 1970. She died in 1984 in Virginia, and DNA testing done in the 90s proved without a doubt that she was unrelated to the Romanovs. But what about the real Anastasia and her family? In 1976, a team of Russian scientists finally found the remains of the Tsar and his wife, along with 3 of their daughters. They kept their discovery a secret until 1991, just before the fall of the Soviet Union. But the mystery continued, as the remains of 13-year-old Prince Alexei and one of his sisters were still missing. Finally, in 2007, investigators found a separate grave. The remains inside were identified as Alexei and his 19-year-old sister Maria. Did this discovery mark the end of the Romanov mystery? Not quite. DNA comparisons with living Romanov relatives confirmed the ID, but the Russian Orthodox Church remains unconvinced and is still deciding whether they can be buried with the rest of the Tsar's family in a St. Petersburg cathedral.
All right. So some of you may have known that already, some of you may have not, but it does come back to this whole crazy time of the world wars going on, and then they're fighting their own revolution, and the royal family gets killed because of it, and it's just very, very interesting, right? And so we get into the end of World War I, and in class it was mentioned, right, that this was the war to end all wars, and many, many people thought it would be, right? They thought it was done. They did not like the fighting. It was horrific. There was so much death. Um, and yet, 21 years later, we get World War II. So, what happened between the end of World War I and the beginning of World War II to really set us up for this war? And there's a lot of little things that contribute to this, but we're going to focus specifically on Germany and Hitler's rise to power in Germany during these years, to see how that really leads to World War II, because honestly, you don't get World War II without Hitler. So on the screen in front of you, you should see a timeline, right? And we're looking from 1919 to 1939, right? These are those years between World War I and between World War II. And we're going to look at each one of these to see how each little event led to the beginning of the war. Okay, so we start in 1919 with the Treaty of Versailles. And the Treaty of Versailles is what ends World War I. And in this treaty, Germany basically gets the blame, right? It's their fault for World War I. Even though it started with Austria-Hungary and the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, Germany really becomes the main aggressor during World War I. So because of this, Germany has to cede land, so they have to give it up. They have to pay millions and billions of dollars in reparations to the Allies, so a ton of money for the lives lost, the land lost, things like that. And then they were forced to keep their military small, meaning they weren't allowed to build up their numbers or their weapons. Remember, think militarism from World War I. They were trying to keep the German army weak. In that same year, we also get the Weimar Republic. In World War I, after Germany is defeated, they are trying to figure out what kind of government to have and are kind of forced into a democracy or a republic, right? So the Weimar Republic is the democratic form of government with a constitution and free elections that Germany adopts after World War I, which again, previously they had more of a monarchy, but this republic allows certain people to come to power. In 1920, we get the development of the SA, okay, or the Sturmbannbildung. My German is not very good, so I apologize for that. But they're a paramilitary group within the Nazi Party. So the Nazi Party is a political party, and the SA is their paramilitary group. And they use violence and intimidation um, as a way to gain followers and to gain power. And that violence and intimidation is also key in Adolf Hitler's rise to power. Um, they were founded by Hitler and they attached themselves to the Nazi movement. In 1923, you get the Beer Hall Putsch, okay? And this is Hitler's attempt at a coup. In a specific beer hall, so kind of like a tavern or a restaurant, there are key leaders of the Weimar Republic meeting. And Hitler takes some of his SA and some other people and storms the beer hall to try to kill them and take over. So the attempted coup in Munich by right-wing members of the army and the Nazi Party was foiled by the government. And because of this, Hitler is charged with high treason. And with this high treason charge comes jail time. So he is put in jail. Which leads us to 1925 in Mein Kampf. While he is in jail, Hitler writes this book. Mein Kampf means my struggle. It is his autobiography. And in the book, it describes the process in which he became anti-Semitic. So why he started to really hate those of the Jewish religion. And it outlines his political ideology and future plans for Germany. We get into the late 1920s, so 1929, and we get to the Great Depression. And this is the same Great Depression that you study in US history, right? The United States is not the only place affected by the Great Depression. Germany sees a collapse as well. However, many people in Germany blame the Treaty of Versailles for this. So if you hadn't limited our government, if you hadn't made us pay all of this money, if you hadn't made us give up land, we would not be in this position. They also felt at this point in time that their leadership was not doing anything to help Germany. So they were looking for a leader that could restore Germany to its former glory. They wanted someone who would give Germany back its power, its money, and honestly, at this point, just enough food for them to eat. They continued to struggle for a while, and in 1933, we get the Reichstag fire. Now, this is an arson attack on the Reichstag building. It's like their Congress or government building, and it's highly debated who caused this fire, right? Lots and lots of people believe that the Nazis burned down this building, but Nazi leadership blames their opposing government party, so their biggest competition at this point in Germany, which was the Communist Party, saying um, that the communists were planning a violent uprising. So the Nazis claimed emergency legislation was needed to prevent this. And they did. They created an act known as the Reichstag Fire Decree, and it abolished a number of the constitutional protections and really paved the way for Nazi dictatorship. Now, the other thing that's very interesting about this fire is that it happens 1 month after Adolf Hitler is sworn in as Chancellor of Germany. So Hitler gets out of jail, right? He has a lot of followers. His political party, the Nazi Party, has a lot of support because, again, they're looking for this strong leader to help them out of the Depression and these horrible times after the war. And Hitler is very, very charismatic. He's very convincing and he has a plan. So you have Paul von Hindenburg, who is the president at this point in time of the Weimar Republic. Um, and he doesn't like Hitler. He is intimidated by Hitler's growing popularity and by the thuggish nature of his supporters. So he doesn't like the SA, he doesn't like the Nazi party. And at first, he refuses to make him chancellor. Okay, he's saying, nope, I will not give this man power. I don't think this is a good thing. However, Hitler is continuing to gain support. People like him. On top of that, he's continuing to push for power. So Hindenburg is convinced by people within the Republic to appoint Hitler as chancellor. Okay? And they do this thinking that, hey, let him think he's winning, give him a little bit of power, give him a little bit of influence, but we've got this. They believed that the vice chancellor and other non Nazi parties within the government, those that held key government positions, could contain and temper Hitler's more brutal tendencies. So they thought they could control him. Give him a little bit of power, he'll be happy, and then we'll make sure he doesn't do anything bad. And this might have worked. Like, it doesn't sound like the best plan, but maybe it would have worked. Except for the fact that a year later, in 1934, Paul von Hindenburg, president of the Weimar Republic of Germany, dies. And with his death, the doors of tyranny are open for Hitler because he is now in this position of chancellor. In the same year that Paul von Hindenburg dies, we also get the Night of the Long Knives. And this is very, very interesting, right? Because we saw back in 1920, so 14 years ago, Hitler created the SA. They were part of him rising to power. They were his close allies. But he starts to get a little bit nervous, right? So, fearing that the paramilitary SA had become too powerful, Hitler ordered his elite SS guards, so this is another group he created, to murder the organization's leaders, including Ernst Röhm, who was one of his close advisors. Okay, so Hitler kind of turns on his own people in this moment and has many killed. After this, in 1935, we get the introduction of the Nuremberg laws. Um, and there are two specific laws here. The laws are for the protection of German blood and German honor, and they prohibit marriages and relationships between Jewish people and Germans. Okay, so they're not allowed to get married, they're not allowed to date, none of that is happening. It is now illegal. And then it also forbade the employment of German females under the age of 45 in Jewish households. So if you were German and under 45, you could not work as a tutor or a nurse or a um, maid in a Jewish household because you were protecting your German blood and your German honor. And this is really important because it's the first time that legally Germans can discriminate against Jews. Not surprisingly, we then get Kristallnacht, which happens in 1939, and this is a night where Nazis in Germany torched Jewish synagogues, they vandalized their homes, their schools, their businesses, and they killed close to 100 Jews in this one night. That same year, you get the Munich Conference. So the world is aware that these things are happening. They're starting to see what's happening in Germany, and they're starting to see that Hitler is pushing for more power for Germany, despite all the agreements in the Treaty of Versailles. So the British government meets with the German government in Munich. and they're trying to negotiate with Germany. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain met with Hitler in Munich to find a compromise over Sudetenland. And Sudetenland is like northern Czechoslovakia, and it's an area of land that was previously part of Germany that Hitler was trying to gain back. And the Munich Agreement states that Germany would receive the Sudetenland and promised that Germany would not take further land from Czechoslovakia. So they're like, okay, we get it. You took over some land. We don't really like it, but you can keep it. Just promise you're not going to take any more. And this really became, this agreement became synonymous with the policy of appeasement. So the world takes on this policy of appeasing Hitler, right? Maybe if we give him what he wants, he'll stop at some point. So not only does he get Sudetenland, but on March 13th and 14th, 1939, Germany violates the Munich Agreement and they occupy Czechoslovakia in general, right? So they take over all of Czechoslovakia, even though they said that they wouldn't. And nothing really happens at this point in time. They're building up the military, they're building up their weapons, they're building up their fervor for gaining new land and restoring Germany's glory. But it isn't until September 1939 that Europe really responds. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland, and the invasion of Poland is what sparks World War II. Okay, and 2 days later, September 3rd, Great Britain and France declare war on Germany. So these are our events that lead us into World War II. But some interesting things happen right before that, right? So we see Hitler becomes chancellor and he's challenging the Treaty of Versailles, blaming that, along with the Jewish people, for the current state of Germany. So weak, in poverty, not enough food for everyone. So part of his plan is to gain back German territory. So he marches on Austria and Czechoslovakia to bring both countries under Nazi rule, right, or German rule. Now, when he marches on Austria, he puts it up to public vote, right? In April of 1938, he says, "Hey, Austria, Germany, I'm going to let you vote. Do you want to be part of Germany, right? Restoring the greater Germany." 98.9% of Germans and 99.71% of Austrians voted to annex Austria. So they voted to allow Austria to become part of Germany. I mean, people didn't like the Treaty of Versailles, but a 99% vote of anything is just like it's unheard of. It's crazy. So because of this, historians have examined the tactics that Nazi leaders used to ensure the vote passed. So, what did they do to get this 99% voting rate? And our central historical question for class today is going to be that. How did the Nazi Party convince 99% of Germans to vote in favor of the annexation of Austria? We're going to look at 3 documents together, and in these documents, we're going to look for evidence as to what it was. Like, how did they convince them to vote in favor of the annexation of Austria? And remember, annexation means like the takeover or the lead into. Okay, so document A is a speech from Hitler that he gave on April 9th, one day before the vote. So we're going to underline details that support our opinion of how did the Nazis convince 99% of Germans to vote in favor of the annexation of Austria. So the speech says, "When one day we shall be no more, then the coming generations shall be able to look back with pride upon this day, the day on which a great Volk affirmed the German community. In the past, millions of German men shed their blood for this Reich. How merciful a fate to be allowed to create this Reich today without suffering. Now rise, German Volk, subscribe to it, hold it tightly in your hands. I wish to thank Him who allowed me to return to my homeland, so that I could return it to my German Reich. May every German realize the importance of the hour tomorrow. assess it, and then bow his head in reverence before the will of the Almighty, who has wrought this miracle in all of us within these past few weeks. Okay, so how did the Nazi Party convince 99% of Germans to vote in favor of the annexation of Austria? So there's some key phrases here, right? So generations will look back upon this day with pride. We can create this Reich, this kingdom without suffering. It's the will of the Almighty, right? He's using very, very specific terms to make it seem like Austria and Germany belong together. They are one nation. Okay, document B, we're going to look at a poster, and this is a propaganda poster that was posted around Austria during this time period. Okay, and if you look here, it is in German, but the caption says Greater Germany. Yes, on April 10th. And if you look here, there's not really anything to underline, but you notice, what is this poster communicating? All of the hands in this poster are white, right? But it is a mix of married and unmarried. You see some wedding rings on some fingers here. Most of these hands look like men, right? We see suit jackets, we see business shirts. You don't really see something that might be a more feminine shirt here. It is a large group, right? There's no faces, so you can't really see who it is. They're faceless, they're nameless, but it is a large group that is in support of this annexation. And yes is bold, right? It's the Ja in red and an exclamation point. So it's very, very much in support of this event. The document we're going to look at is the ballot itself. Okay, so they had to vote on April 10th whether or not they wanted this to happen. And if you look at the ballot, it says, do you agree with the reunification of Austria with the German Reich that was enacted on March 13th, 1938? And do you vote for the party of our leader, Adolf Hitler? And it's kind of tricky here, right? So it's saying, one, do you agree with the reunification? So that Germany and Austria are already one place. So we're just putting it back to its natural order. You'll also see that they're asking two questions here. So there's only one spot to answer, but they're asking, do you vote for the political party, right? So for the Nazi Party, and do you agree with the reunification? Which might have been a tactic to get more people to say yes. And then if you look, um, the spot to vote yes is centered. It is drastically larger than the spot to vote no, which is over off to the right. It's smaller, it's a little bit less bold print. And then just another interesting thing you might notice is Adolf Hitler is the largest thing on this voting ballot. So it's basically saying, like, if you like Hitler, if you support him, vote yes, right? And yes is right under him. It's large. It's the first thing that catches your eye. Okay, so looking at these documents, how did the Nazi Party convince 99% of Germans to vote in favor of the annexation of Austria? If you think about it, it really comes down to the propaganda, right? Hitler is saying, I am Austrian, but now I am ruling Germany, and we are one. I support you all. You've got the posters showing all of this support that so many people, these large groups, support the reunification. And then the ballot itself is skewed to get people to vote yes, one way or another, or maybe not even realizing that there is a spot to mark no. And that is how the Nazi Party gets 99% of people to support Austria becoming part of Germany in 1938. So you guys are going to do a quiz, which is looking at Hitler's rise to power. So looking at some of these things, you're going to read chapter 30, section 3, pages 723 to 725, so just 2 pages. You're also going to look at the lesson answer key and your chapter highlights and use those on your quiz. You also have an exit ticket that is due today, and that it will be available starting this afternoon. So get that done. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can email me. You can text me, you can call me. I will answer your questions. And then just know um, next week you're going to be looking at securing the peace, so the end of World War I, and then we're going to start looking at the Cold War. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I will see you next week.